The data center industry is moving faster than ever, and behind the scenes, some seriously smart people are making it all happen. Welcome to the Inside Data Center podcast, where we dive into the stories, insights, and innovations driving real change across the industry. From hyperscale campuses to game-changing technologies, we're talking to the people shaping the future of digital infrastructure. Whether you live and breathe data centers or just want to understand what's powering our connected world, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Inside Data Center podcast. We're back with another edition of our monthly, that is not monthly, data center news and GPUs. Afternoon, Ben.
How you doing, Andy? This is monthly podcast number 3 in a 12-month period, so we're doing well at the moment.
I know. I had to look back to when our last episode went out, and it was August 2025. So I can only apologise to the 2 or 3 people that have been sat there waiting for the next monthly edition. But we're back. We are here now, and we will try and do it. I'm not even going to commit to monthly anymore. we will try and do another one before the end of the year. Time being time allowed, really. But been a crazy 9 months when you think about it. It's a crazy month. It's a crazy day. OpenAI have just cancelled delayed the UK development. So, you know, the world is changing every few hours. But let's start with a real simple question. What's been happening in your world then, Ben? Where are you at right now?
Honestly, the biggest thing I think is, the biggest thing, pun intended, is scale now, right? So if we cast our minds back to the far-flung past of 12 months ago, there were press releases, some pretty big announcements. Like there was the UK AI summit last April sort of time. There was all of the large announcements that came out of France. It looked like Europe was finally starting to do things. Things were starting to move in the right direction. And very little of that has actually come to pass, in Europe at least. But then you look at what's happening in the States now and how the bottom falling out of the H100 market is now definitely no longer the case, right? Prices are going back up. Everyone is compute constrained. Demand is through the roof. I think it really just goes to show how quickly things can change in this market. And honestly, I've given up trying to predict what's going to happen. I mean, back in December 24, based on what I was seeing at the time, and there were 150 Neoclouds offering the same thing, right? Which was H100s or H200s in what seemed like a commodity market with everyone locked in a race to the bottom. I put out a piece in the Tech Capital saying that I thought that some of them were going to go bust last year. I was roundly wrong. I think there were like 2 that went under. And that's really just a market timing standpoint, because if they've been able to hold on for a couple more months, then they probably would have caught this demand wave as well. And this is where we find ourselves. I mean, the things like OpenClaw, the improvements in Anthropic's models with Opus and co-work and dispatch and code and everything now, it's absurd. You know what? I don't really know how to describe it any other way.
No, it is crazy times. And I was looking earlier at Synergy Research brought a report out, didn't they? I think it was this week or very, very recently anyway. When you look at Neoclouds, because it's still such a mystical area of this industry that not a lot of people know a lot about. You kind of, myself included, you're trying to learn more about this ever evolving, call it an industry that, like you say, changes every 10 minutes. But revenue exceeded $25 billion for 2025, up 223% year on year in Q4, CAGR of 58%. And there's still people out there that say there's no revenue in this. Where's the profit coming from? Like, the profit's there. It's just not there at the scale that people are expecting it, and they're not. And maybe these companies are not shouting about. And like you say, you've got companies like CoreWeave, Crusoe, Core Scientific, Lambda, Nebius, Nscale. It's just like announcement after announcement, whether it's capital raising, new development. It's an absolute crazy world. I know your newsletter obviously really focuses on that area. Mine's more broad in the data center industry, but it's becoming more frequent that there's multiple news stories and significant news stories from these types of organizations. So you're seeing them. I would say they're definitely mainstream now. I would 100% say it's a mainstream part of the industry now, but like I said, still very unknown, still a bit mystical, still a bit of anti-data center rhetoric around these types of players. You're still seeing Bitcoin miners come into it, which always creates a bit of animosity, if I can say it. So yeah, interesting, but it's crazy, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the scale of the neoclouds and how they've grown over the course of the past year, because like N scale this time last year, like doing things, but not anything massive at scale, and now they've just bought an American power company planning to do an 8 gigawatt site, and Sheryl Sandberg's on the board and Nick Clegg. Now, I mean, I've got opinions about those solutions,
Brush
but
over
like,
that one. Brush
yeah,
over
yeah,
that.
we'll ignore that bit. But ultimately, if you're a startup and you're attracting individuals who are operating at that level, right, who've gone from either being on the board of one of the most successful companies of the past 20 years, or, I mean, both of them like have been in that position, right, coupled with the political influence that comes as well, and you're a startup, you can get those people to buy in enough that they want to be a part of whatever it is you're building. That certainly says something, and and that's a year. It's absurd. We've gone
And a
from
$2 billion
conversation
raise as well.
exactly
Like
right. We've gone from
$2
conversations
billion
around like
raise for Ensco.
40 megawatt conversations this time last year to if it's not a gigawatt, I'm not interested. And that's, I mean, like the UK's grid capacity is what, circa 35 gig or something like that, all in. So you've got 1/35th of the entire capacity of the UK grid. And then they've just announced an 8 gigawatt campus. It's absurd. Like the
And
scale is absolutely enormous.
I do think we have to touch on the point though around what's announced and what's delivered, don't we? What's
Yeah.
executed, like because I recorded another podcast yesterday, funny enough, which isn't it probably go out after this one, but around execution and delivery and kind of the thought process of organisations. It was a report by BCS Consultancy, which is obviously largely UK centric, but a lot of what you're seeing is these huge announcements. So let's pick a gigawatt number. It doesn't really matter what it is, but the detail might say first phase is 20 megawatts and the
Yeah.
second phase
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
60 megawatts. And it's I think it's important that I know why these organizations, well, I don't know, but I have my thinking around why these organizations do it. They're trying to attract customers, they're trying to kind of attract community engagement, but it also can do the opposite. So I think there's definitely a conversation around what's announced and can you execute it. And I think
Yeah.
when you look at Neocloud as well, the commitments they have are unbelievable. So can you, even if you've got everything, all your ducks in a row, you're ready to go, you're going to build, can you deliver it and execute it in the speed that you have to do it? I think there's so many different angles to that conversation. I'd love to see a graph of what's announced and what's delivered over the next 2-3 years. I think it'll be an interesting
Yeah.
bar chart.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm building something like that actually. So once that's live, I'll let you know.
Yeah, over
But
to you. Over to you.
so honestly, I think I mean, the part of the reason I started the newsletter, right, was because I was tired of wading through press releases. Because it's very difficult to sell GPUs to someone if they haven't got any money, but it makes it seem like they have got money, right? You just end up spending all of your time talking to tire kickers, and there are plenty of tire kickers in this space. But then you read through a press release, and to your point, right, you'll have this 500 words of game changing this and world changing that and all of this fun stuff. And you get to the end, and then there's one sentence which is like, and we expect to close funding for this project in Q1 26. It's like, oh, so you haven't actually got any money.
Yeah.
So it sounds great, and like sometimes it's a cart before the horses thing, whereby it's like, right, if we get the timings of this press release right, investors are prone to FOMO just like everybody else, right? So if we can get this out and we can make enough of the right noise in the right place with the right people, by the time the dust settles from this announcement going out, we'll actually probably then have enough cash and enough interest to then be able to deliver on what we've said, right? And everyone knows that there's some of that stuff going on at the moment, right? Given how opaque this market is and the shall we say the issues with governance that seem to be bubbling to the surface in some ways, like for example the 50% of data centers which have apparently been cancelled in the US recently, right? There's a lot of noise around them. Why were they cancelled? What were the reasons for those cancellations? Is it because they weren't fundable? Is it because they weren't viable? I don't know. really. Who lost money, right? And where can we find that information?
And there's also an element of were they ever going to happen as well? Because
Yeah,
yeah, are you basing that on an announcement that actually had no facts behind it? It was simply an announcement. So yeah, I think, and obviously you're getting delays and you're getting challenges at the moment. You know, supply chains getting smashed again. Like it's hard for everyone to keep up. But yeah, it's I think you just one of the great things about this industry is you never really know. Like you can hear different stories from two very well placed people, and you think, well, one of you can't both be right, but maybe there is a middle ground somewhere in that conversation. I don't think many people ever really know what's happening, and now it has got to the scale of some of these. It has got to the government kind of table, and therefore you're never going to know unless you're in that conversation.
yeah, and I mean, fair play, right? Like everyone, building something is hard at the best of times, right? Building something at that scale is incredibly hard because once you start operating at that level, the number of stakeholders that you're having to manage to be able to get something to go, that's a full-time job with a team around you in and of itself. Never mind actually building and running the business, right? You spend so much time working on the business that you're not necessarily able to be down in the detail. So I mean, again, going from nowhere to an 8 gigawatt campus over the period of a couple of years, fair play. I
Yeah,
couldn't do
no,
it.
100% fair play. And I also think, like, what do you think about the shift in customers as well? Because again, that's become kind of more noisy, hasn't it? Around we have a customer, said customer's pulled out, we now have a new customer, and I think you've seen it quite a lot in the US, particularly where some of the major sites like Abilene and the like have had, we've had a customer and the customer's changed. By the time it's announced in the media that they've lost a customer, everyone actually knows that they've already got a new customer. So it's not even it's sort of it's public knowledge that the new customer's secured before they're announcing that the old customer's moved on. But you're definitely seeing a bit of a shift in, I guess, organisations. A lot of it's probably geographic around where they do and where it's best placed for that capacity at any time. But you are seeing some of these major scale facilities, like I've got a 400 megawatt customer, all of a sudden I haven't. It's not a small amount of capacity that you've then got to shift. But on your point at the beginning, the demand's so crazy that's going as quickly as it's
Yeah,
lost.
then you end up with the problem, right, of like who is able to sign a contract for 400
Of
megawatts,
that
right? Like
scale. Yeah.
who's got a balance sheet that is going to be able to support that kind of risk? Who are you going to trust to be able to honor that kind of a commitment? And there's realistically only like six globally who can take on a project of that size. And I mean, everyone wants to work with them, right? It's your Microsofts, it's your Metas, it's your Oracles to a degree, OpenAI, Anthropic. Everyone wants those customers. Everyone wants to sign them, but there is it's a buyer's market in that regard, right? And equally with customers at that scale, they're not signing your contract; you're signing their contract, right? There's probably going to be terminations of convenience clauses in there as well. For example, like you have to sell us the compute at the lowest rate in the market, otherwise we're going to walk. Because what are you going to do? Sue us, right? So I think that area of the market's interesting because that's a very very different game to be playing. But I think the other thing that we're starting to see is this kind of proliferation of basically Neolabs in the middle, right? So 12 months ago, only games in town were the big model builders. Now we're seeing, I mean, companies like Basecamp Research in the UK, for example, right, building out foundation models on monumental genomic data sets that they've been building from research trips into the deepest, darkest Amazon for the past 10 years or so. And then all of a sudden, they've got the Eden family of models, which are LLMs trained on that genomic data, right? And that's super interesting. That's a lot more interesting than a chatbot. Similar with things like Luminary AI, which is physics AI, and like all of these neo labs that are going after like a specific set of problems using a specific set of data. And I think we're really going to see more of that going forward, especially considering it looks like NVIDIA are kind of getting involved in the open source model game a little bit at the moment, which also makes it seem a little bit like they're competing with their customers, which is interesting. But that also makes sense because both OpenAI and Anthropic are designing their own chips. So why would you not compete with your customers in that regard? If they're going to muscle in on your business and you can build some open source models which then lower the barrier to entry for an enterprise deployment who can take one of your open source models off the shelf, fine tune it on their company data, and it means that you can then sell them hardware so they can deploy on prem. It's a win for everybody, right? Especially with the conversations around data sovereignty. So again, it's just speed. None of this existed 12 months ago, right? None of it existed, and now here we are.
Yeah, it's crazy. And another point as well, like, it's kind of the circle of capital, which is kind of what you touched on as well.
The
But like
big ball of money.
yeah, the cost of capital as well. You know, like it's very different times economically to what it was 12 months ago. You know, even 3 months ago, 6 months ago. Geopolitically, it's a bit of it's an interesting place at the moment, and I think people are forgetting the cost of capital. You know, like the money behind all of this has to make money. You know, that's how money works. It's in it for a return, and as capital increases in cost, you're obviously going to see that impact. Either the cost to build these facilities is going to significantly increase, or you're going to see capital withdraw, and will it redeploy into areas such as the UAE and the Middle East, where there's now going to be a big reconstruction, hopefully, if everything settles down there, then will capital redeploy? So there's all these different angles to this industry that are always kind of shaking things up a little bit.
I mean, loads of different moving parts. I mean, the capital cost conversation is interesting because, on the one hand, with all of the bigger picture geopolitical risk that everyone's having to manage at the moment, coupled with things like the memory supply chain constraints or the HDD or SDD supply chain constraints, which are increasing capex for the clusters for, I don't know, like 40% or something stupid like that. On the other hand, you've got a lot more players who are able to fund GPUs and fund the compute clusters that didn't exist previously. So that part of the financing ecosystem is now starting to mature. Like, you've got the bigger ticket investment banks who are now actually getting involved. You've got financialization companies like Orn, for example, who are looking to create forward markets or are creating forward markets, or Compute Index, who are another player out Switzerland with Silicon Data with these different indices as well, and all are focused on financializing effectively the new asset class, right, which is then going to make it even easier for more money to get in. And again, none of this existed 12 months ago, right? So I think on the one hand, it seems like the easy money to throw at just a data center because I'm a landowner who happens to have a decent power connection and I might have a good enough fiber connection to be able to do something. I think that easy money is now gone, right? It seems like investors are doing a lot more due diligence into whether or not a site is actually viable. One metric that I've seen or heard being used in the US is no longer time to power. Because what does time to power mean, right? Does that mean that you're going to have a grid connection? Does that mean that you're going to have a transformer? Are you going to have your substation? Like, what is that? Metric that's being used there more often is time to gas. How quickly can you get connected to whatever gas pipeline? And that seems to be the way that the really big stuff is getting going. Like the XAI Memphis clusters, for example, with Colossus and Colossus 2, it's all gas turbines. It's all off-grid. It's all behind the wire. And that seems to be the way that things are going. And it's really only going to accelerate as well, because if you can reduce your time to market, it gives your competitors less of an advantage. And then there's also the time value of money as well. If you can get your money working quicker because you're using, I don't know, gas instead of a grid connection, that's going to put less strain on the grid for one hand, and you're going to start making a return quicker as well. And again, 12 months ago, a few players were talking about behind the meter, behind the wire pricing, or microgrids or whatever, right? And it was kind of a bit fringe. And I mean, you've been in this industry for far longer than I, right? Everyone has kind of done things the same way for a very long period of time, and then all of a sudden there's all of these upstarts, which a year ago were like, this isn't the way that it works. Those upstarts have been roundly proven correct, and now everyone is having to scramble. So again, It's just change.
Yeah,
As an upstart, change.
yeah, exactly. No, I love it. I love it, the way the industry's been shaken up. It was far too stale, far too long, and I think everyone knows that's my opinion. Some people like it, some people don't, but that is my opinion. I think I was talking to a really cool startup in the US. I've got to be careful what I say here, but they're heavily linked to gas-powered sites. You're talking 3 to 5 gigawatt demand from a customer for gas-powered sites. They have access to these sites. It's all secured and they're ready to go. But that is simply that speed to market, speed to capacity. Like whatever you want to call it. The power's there. The power's ready to go. It's gas. It's the US is become very gas centric. I think for the scale that we're talking about in this conversation, I think the grid and the other markets are still there, still needed. But when you're talking scale, it's not viable. I think like the microgrid I went to, pure data centers and AVK in Dublin, cool stuff like that's happening in Europe, but it's nowhere near the scale of what we're talking in the States. Yeah, like it's only 60 megawatt, Andy. That's a quarter of a hall.
Well, again,
I
like, you
think
get so used to talking about these monumental amounts of power, and you get so used to operating in these massive numbers, but then you take a step back and you think, right, like how much power actually is that? It's like hundreds of thousands of homes, and it's just one big shed that's doing math and producing heat.
Yeah, and I think the industry, and again, when you talk about the way we communicate and the way we work,
Mm.
there's so much good stuff that we can do with this power as well. Like there's so much good that we can do, community, like getting that power back into the grid. There's so much we can do. I think the major scale projects definitely need to do. Some are doing a really good job at this, but some aren't of communicating the value and what we can return into the communities, as well as be seen as a take on my earlier point around if you announce a 3 gigawatt site in a community somewhere, it's probably in Texas, but wherever it might be, what are you doing for that community? Like you're bringing economic benefit, but equally, like as John and Sandra are living in their house in Texas, what's the benefit to them? What can you do for them? Like the way we communicate still needs to be significantly improved. I know like Applied Digital have done a really good job. Happy to name someone. They've done a lot of work on the community and inviting them into the site, showing people around, trying to give back. I think that's equally as important as kind of what we're trying to do. Yes, it values us as a society by having access to whatever it is we've got access to, but equally there's got to be some community benefits to the everyday person on the streets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw a survey recently of, I can't remember where it was in the US, but people would prefer to have an Amazon distribution warehouse close to them than they would a data center, right? And I think that kind of tells you everything that you need to know about how the industry is still being perceived at the moment. But I think that because there are so many perceptions and everyone has an opinion about what proliferation, wide-scale usage of AI means from an employment standpoint, we're now going to have to subscribe to absolutely everything standpoint, right, through to surveillance and all of that sort of stuff, that tends to dominate the conversation in terms of like what's possible, what do people understand to be possible, what are we communicating is possible. There's always this kind of slightly negative lens to it, right, which very well may be true, right? But just from a personal standpoint, playing with these tools over the course of the past few months or so, and really switching from ChatGPT to Claude, if I'm honest, it's like going from riding a horse to driving a car, or going from using Bing to using Google. I think is probably a better analogy. Yeah.
I saw someone with that exact analogy on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I think it was today or yesterday. It made me laugh.
It's so accurate. But then you realize that, like, okay, what problems am I trying to solve for myself initially? And because of the way that things have generally worked forever up until this point, you generally have a pretty good understanding of what the limits of your personal capability are, right? And you'll stop short of that limit so you don't, I don't know, commit some sort of social faux pas or make yourself look bad professionally or something along those lines, right? And you'll stop at that limit and you won't push any further. But with these tools, they are infinitely capable, right? So if you're trying to build a solution to a problem that you're facing, you'll come up to that limit and then you'll suddenly realize it's incredibly porous because you've got a tool that's going to help you navigate it. So, I mean, I've found that what I'm able to do with these tools, the stuff that I'm able to build, the information I'm able to gather, the understanding I'm then able to develop with all of this other stuff that I've been able to build as well, just in the past couple of months or so is incredibly different. And I think that if more people understood that the big grey box, which is using a lot of power very, very close to you while kicking out a huge amount of heat, is a massive force multiplier if you spend time playing with these tools, that I think we generally have a better time communicating, because it's still an intangible benefit. It's more of an experiential benefit. And I think the only way that people are really going to understand that is to take some time to play with it. But then it's really difficult sometimes to communicate that, depending on what industry you're operating in or what job you're doing, that if you're playing with these tools and these tools are actively undermining your ability to be employed or to make any money, you're going to go in with a perception, and that's a completely fair enough perception, right? So I think bridging that gap, and then also trying to make sure that things are a little bit more fair, in that we're not just using these massive American models, which are incredibly proficient, but then all of that data is going overseas, all of that tax money is going overseas, all of that benefit is going overseas. That's a really, really difficult thing, especially in the UK, because we've got, I mean, what, the different AI growth zones? Great idea in principle, right? But where's the demand? The demand exists, but it's all being funneled through Claude.ai or ChatGPT at the moment. There isn't anything really sovereign in the open, and there seems to be this resistance to using the open source models in the UK at scale because they're Chinese, and we don't like that. Even though it's on-prem, it's
No.
air gapped, and you can completely, like, it's not going to do anything. You can take it, you can fine tune it, and you can get rid of all of the stuff that you don't want in there, right? People don't want to do that because we don't want to take the risk. So it's difficult. It's a difficult situation.
Yeah, I think with the use of AI, I'm quite, I guess, opinionated on this one. Like, you've got to educate people, haven't you? Like, you
Mm.
can't. I think there's this balance, and I don't want to get political on it. Like, they kind of do, and they don't want you to use it. So it's like, what's the what's the balance between educating individuals how you use it? You know, like again, like you've gone off on your own with an basic understanding of it. You've used Claude, you've developed things with it, like in simple terms, you know. But you've had to do that all on your own. You probably had to go and find how to use it on your own. You've had to do it unless you go on a course, and that's obviously economic, you know, challenge. Some people can't afford things like that. You've got to do it all yourself, and I think that applies all the way down the education spectrum right now. It's all like, you know, in China they're teaching kids in infant school equivalent how to use these things, whereas my children are 9 and 12, and if it wasn't for me saying, oh, you know, you could do this or you could do that, they wouldn't have the foggiest idea. Well, that's a very British term. They wouldn't have a clue like what to do or how to do it. And then, but then as a country, we're like, oh, we're an AI. I know we're not, but we say, oh, we want to be an AI
Yeah.
powerhouse. You're never going to be an
AI
AI
superpower.
powerhouse in anything. Can't even build a blue data center. But but how do you expect to be that if you don't help people learn and understand it? You know, like
Yeah.
I have a even myself. Like I said to you, I'm not technical at all. Like I'd love to be able to kind of spend the time like you have to develop things and look at how it can benefit. And we use it as a business, and we have people in our business that are, this is what they do. But it's, you still have to. I still think it's in that period where you've got to learn it all yourself. So you've got to be really
Yeah.
into it, haven't you? And you have to have a basic technical understanding really to work out how it works.
And you've got time. Time is the
Yeah,
biggest thing
time's a
as well,
problem.
right? Like I'm fortunate that I work for myself. It's taken many years to get to a point where I have enough time to be able to step away from trying to keep the lights
To
on,
play. Yeah,
to be able
exactly.
to
Yeah.
play with stuff, right? Like I'm no longer having to put out fires on a 24/7 basis. It's only like a 16/7 basis now, which gives me a little bit of extra time. But a lot of people just don't have that opportunity at the moment, for any number of reasons, right? And I think that that's the difficulty. How do you find ways to bridge that gap? How do you, I mean, create enough, one, time, and two, cognitive headspace for someone to think, right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to experiment with this stuff and see what I can do with it, as opposed to, don't know, my rent has gone up, or I've got this going on with my job, or I'm not being paid enough, or this bill has come in. There's all of this stuff going on as well, and that's the difficulty, I think. Um, and then if you're someone who's in that position, right, and you see individuals who are doing all of this stuff with it, and you don't have the time to do it, that's only going to breed resentment, right? It's never going to come across in a positive way, and then these massive companies raising huge amounts of money when you're trying to keep food on the table. Again, how do you bridge that gap? That's difficult.
Yeah, and I
That's the
think
bigger problem.
I think it, yeah, I guess I was thinking about that when you're talking. My view would be if you're an employer, and we're probably going a bit off topic here, but it's worth a rant. If you're an employer, you've got to allocate time for your employees to learn this stuff. It's only going to benefit you as a business. Like, and I think don't see it as a threat. 100% do not see it as a threat, because if you are seeing it as a threat, your business and your people are probably are in big problems, shall we
You've got
say?
a bigger
Like,
problem.
um, yeah. You have a bigger problem not doing it than you do doing it. Is probably a good way to put it. Like, this is coming. There's no doubt about it. And like you say, I think when you get into it and you see real proper business case uses for it, then you start to understand what's coming. Like when I went, like I said to you earlier, when I went to that Microsoft AI event in London, you see what this stuff can do and what people are doing with it. And it's a very small amount of people using it at the moment because people don't understand. But it's coming. Like there's no doubt about it. It's going to totally shift the way we work, the way we live, the way we do everything. And having an understanding of it is only going to be advantageous to you across everything. Just in your life, really, not just in your work. But there you go. Anyway, data centers. Let's go back.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Right, so I think that's probably quite an interesting segue into how the shape of the market is changing, right? So
yeah,
again, last year, conversations, massive facilities, and it's still massive facilities, right? But those massive facilities tend to be training, right? It's not necessarily
yeah,
interesting
yeah,
from an inference standpoint because you've got all kinds of issues around latency. Like, don't get me wrong, rural northern Norway is a fantastic place because power's nice and cheap. And if the connectivity is good enough, but that's not going to be great for real-time inference use cases. So medical, self-driving cars, that sort of thing, right? It's just not going to work. I think inference is now very much a massive demand driver. And we're seeing NVIDIA's Grok acquisition is basically a tacit admission that the GPU is no longer the only viable thing, and we're going to integrate the LPUs as well. You've got the likes of Cerebras, Furiosa, various other novel emerging semiconductors raising huge amounts of money in the UK as well. What does that do to the shape of the data center? Right. So one thing that I'm seeing, I'd be interested to get your opinion here, is that suddenly it seems like there's finally some conversation happening around like smaller, decentralized, modular deployments that are either
should
in
we call
or
it
close
edge?
to
Should we
urban
call
centers.
it?
I mean, can you really call like 1 or 2 megawatts an edge site though? That's the
It just
thing.
Edge still makes me laugh to this day. Like, I've got podcasts from 4 or 5 years ago when people are talking about Edge, and I used to ask
It's coming.
everybody, "What does Edge
What does it
mean?" Like, no
mean?
one even knew. Yeah, no one knew what it was. But yeah, 100%. Like, inference is a driver now. Definitely, I think you are seeing platform invest. I say private equity. Let's say you're seeing PE look at this market now, which again tells you where it's coming. Like, I've had a couple of
Yeah.
conversations with quite significant PE houses or whatever you want to call them, who are investing, let's say hundreds of millions, maybe into the billions, into these areas, and there's a reason for that, and that is demand. There's always a period where people talk about a lot of things, not a lot happens. You can see it coming, but you don't know when. Then when the money starts to look at it, you know it's coming. And yes, definitely seeing it in Europe and the US, 100%. And I'm sure I'm not as active in APAC, but I don't doubt it's no different out there as well. But yeah, it's definitely a market. I'm not going to call it edge. You can call it whatever you want, but it is like you say, smaller data centers in urban areas. Let's
Yeah.
call it that. Catchy.
Yeah. It really rolls off the tongue, that doesn't it? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
to your point, right? The money moving in is validating, and I think that's going to be a much more interesting market in Europe and the UK, especially because we don't have big old patches of land with a spare gig lying here and lying
Yeah.
there, like in the US. It tends to be smaller pockets, which I don't know could be in some sort of other distressed asset. The power's locked up, the grid connection's there. It's too small for a big training data center, but it then becomes much, much more interesting for something inference focused. And if things like cerebral systems, right? Like it's 5,000 tokens per second throughput or something ridiculous like that, and it's a 23 kilowatt system versus like a 1 megawatt rack. That then becomes much, much more interesting for those edge inference sites. And I
Don't call
think
them
that
edge.
edge,
I
kind of
also,
edge.
but I also think when you think about the energy problem as well, the energy and the solution and the community impact as well, integrating these smaller urban data centers into I'm going to just call it that for the crack now, into developments where you're building a microgrid and you're building a data center and you're offsetting your heat into the community. All of a sudden, you've got like a all-encompassing development. You're not taking from the grid, you're actually giving back. You're not taking heat, you're actually giving back. And I think you can do that at that scale, and economically, from the conversations I've had, it's viable to the private equity as well. Whereas at a significant scale, it's very hard to make the power sort of circular economy viable. That's the challenge.
Yeah, definitely. What's the most interesting project that you've heard of recently?
At the moment, it's let's have a think. There's a lot of new. I think what's happening, I'd say, in the last month has been more. I put a post about it yesterday. More talk about countries like Spain now going. Like they've been talked about for ages, but there's development investment. Microsoft in Zaragoza, Amazon in Zaragoza, but all of a sudden you're seeing new developments coming, new platforms being created, power secured. So I think you're going to see more of the newer regions start to come to the fore now, and there's multiple reasons for that. A lot of it is just the power pressure in the areas where they want to be is just impossible now. You're seeing it with Finland as well, like Finland, a lot, like Nebius and alike, starting to move into these regions. So the geographic spread's definitely changing, and I mean at the scale. Like there's obviously already been developments in these areas, but now you're talking about the scale. Project wise, I think a lot of the bigger ones have not really come through yet. I think you've got like your N scale and alike that are out there that trying to build a data center in a ski resort, which is always always challenging. But there's a lot coming that I don't know if I can talk about that are significant scale in quite exciting areas, which I think will be they'll definitely be challenging from a people perspective, which is why they're talking to me about them. But nothing specific springs to mind. But it's everywhere, isn't it now? Like I think when you start looking at, I still think the repurposing of buildings is quite a cool play when companies are doing that, redeveloping on power stations, power grids. That's kind of where the industry needs to go. I'm talking a lot of new monies looking at the industrial sites now, which you've seen probably multiple announcements where they've acquired X gigawatt of X power sites of some description, whether it's a coal or whatever it might be. That's definitely a play now, like a significant play. I think you'll see much more of that over the next, say, 12 to 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think on my side as well, it's new names starting to appear.
Well, I was thinking earlier when we were talking. Sorry to interrupt, but like we say, like like your N-Scale and Nebius, and these companies have been around for a while, but they've only really come to the fore. Let's say 12 to 18-month period, approximately, probably less than that when you actually look. Is there going to be any more that come into the scale of them? Because it's always, they're there now. They've got an amount of the market. They're obviously ahead from a capital perspective. So can somebody else get into that area? Look, you used to have these conversations about the standard colo data centers. Can anyone break into the digital Equinix type world? And people did. But can you get into that world? Because you've got to do it so quickly with so much money. Is there an opportunity for someone to jump to the fore that we may have heard of, but don't know that well right now.
100%, 100%. I mean, so two come to mind, both Australian, right? So Firmus is one, just raised an absolutely
Firmus are cool.
monumental amount of money, and they're building a data center in Tasmania. And then the other one
Tasmania,
is Sharon AI. So they went
yeah.
public relatively recently, and from that initial prospectus filing, the initial filings they put in, they went public with 432 GPUs online, right? 432, and none of them were hoppers. They've just signed Canva as a customer,
Yeah.
right? And that's one big marquee customer.
Galaxy,
and then all
pretty
of a sudden,
cool as well.
Yep.
They announced their results today. In my head, that's why, because I read the press release probably about 2 hours ago. But yeah, so yeah, when you say it like that, there are, and I guess it's what's known and what's unknown, isn't it? Yeah, we've probably heard of these. A lot of people may not have done because geographically they might be in different regions or they're just not eyes on it. But yeah, there are. When you think about all the money that's been raised,
marquee name. Yeah, exactly. But then I think like the overwhelming majority of enterprises at this stage aren't really doing anything at massive scale just yet, right? Like HSBC are working with Mistral, for example, or you've got Canva signing with Sharon AI. And these are a couple of big names. And then there's probably going to be loads of other companies who are doing stuff on-prem because they're just not going to ever put their data in a cloud environment because of the nature of whatever their business is. But like, that's a minority, right? And there are a lot of incredibly valuable companies out there who are going to want their own infrastructure, right? And this is really just the beginning. And if you think about, I mean, OpenClaw has been a massive, massive demand driver. The improvement of open source models has also been a massive, massive demand driver. And then you realize that like today is the worst that this stuff is ever going to be. It's only going to get better. And I mean, think about how many people pay for access to ChatGPT or Claude versus the free users, right? And then think about how many people as an overall percentage of the entire population are using this stuff. And this is the demand problem that we're having at the moment. This is the capacity problem that we're having right now. It's insane. So I think there's plenty of space for other players to get in there. And I think we'll probably see some other pretty big names appear relatively soon because it seems like from the conversations that I'm having and from other announcements and relationships, right, the kinds of people who are now starting to get involved, they're different. They're a different class of operator who've watched what's happening, waited to see what mistakes people make so they don't make those same mistakes when they get involved as well. And there's a lot of that happening at the moment, especially in the UK. And especially in Europe, so it's going to be quite an exciting time, I think. I mean, again, this is always the same sign-off. It's a very exciting place to be, and things are moving quickly.
you mean it's not going to be boring anymore? What are we going to do? All this spare time I've got. But yeah, no, it's an amazing place to be, I think. And on your point before we wrap up, it's that risk-free reward, isn't it? Like you've got different capital has different level of risk. You know, some takes, let's say 5% risk, some is in the 1%, some it's under that. And when you start getting into the significant capital, there's a very, very low level of risk, quite rightly. And when you start to see that coming into the market, it's a very educated investment, isn't it? And I guess that's your point around there will still be more capital, it'll be different capital, and this capital probably a bit of a less risk averse portfolio. So it's be interesting to see what happens. But anyway, we better wrap it up. Otherwise, we'll talk all day about the education system and the use of AI in the.
It's a minor detour into politics, there. Yeah.
I thought we did well to actually avoid
brought it back.
Getting too opinionated on it. But no, definitely. But if anyone wants to carry on that conversation, please reach out. Happy to do so.
Happily
I'll let you go.
Maybe not recorded.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're definitely not recording that bit. But yeah, I'll let you go. If obviously, as I always say, Ben's GPU newsletter, which Ben can direct you, thegpu.ai. But if you want to definitely subscribe if you want to learn more about this stuff, I'm learning about it. That's why Ben's here, so he can teach us all. But yeah, if you want to know anything more about that world, get in touch with Ben. Obviously, if you want to speak to me for whatever reason, you know, I'm quite easy to find these days.
And you're everywhere.
Everywhere and anywhere, always somewhere, as I say. But yeah. Anyway, I'll let you go. Good to catch up. We'll do this again not in a month, but in a smaller time period than we did the previous one. Yeah, and I'm sure something will have happened by then in this ever boring industry. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, Andy.
That's it for this episode of the Inside Data Center podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This show is brought to you by DataX and Data Exec, the recruitment partners powering global talent across the data center and digital infrastructure world. If you enjoyed today's conversations, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe. It really helps us grow the podcast community. Stay tuned for more stories, insights, and conversations with the people shaping the future of our industry.